I think I know the answer to this, but why is rap and hip hop considered almost dirty words among Christians? And why need it not be that way?
I think whenever art is combined with capitalism, the things that are going to sell the most are going to be the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and a pride of life, as First John says. So you're taking any really art form and you combine it with a need to make money, and now publicly traded corporations are involved. What is the easiest thing to sell to people? It's vice. Give people what their flesh gratifies. So the music that's going to rise to the top is not going to be the most quality or the most virtuous. It's going to be the stuff that kind of appeals to those carnal, sinful desires. And when you're exploiting a product, and I don't mean in a negative sense, I mean like exploiting it for profit, you're trying to be as mass appealing as possible. Well, what do people like? They like violence. They like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They love these things. So you give them what they want. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you give them the thing that's bad for them because it sells the most. And then the next generation takes it and goes to another level and another level and another level. And so now multiple generations removed, and you have pretty dark, debaucherous stuff in terms of the mainstream side of things. But there's always exceptions to the rule. And so I think when people look at that, they're not, I mean, it's no different than Hollywood. Like, what are the most popular movies prior, you remove like Fast and the Furious 15 or whatever version they're on, and it's going to be stuff that's appealing to those desires, violence, right? Mm-hmm. The difference though with Hollywood is we kind of all know this is not real. With rap, you get rewarded for appearing real. And so rap is no different than like WWE characters, except now the next generation and next generation are really trying to be what they rap about. And so you get this really dark culture now with not all of hip hop, but a good percentage of it where it overlaps with the streets and the drug and the pimping and all that sort of stuff. And so I think some of the critique is fair. I think a lot of it is also telling that people don't really know what else is out there. Like if your lowest view of hip hop is the crazy debaucherous stuff, then you probably don't know the rest of this. It would be like me hyper generalizing all of rock and roll music with Ozzy Osbourne biting off a pigeon's head and saying all of it's satanic and demonic. And it's like, well, no, that's just the stuff that is the biggest, right? So I think that's why it gets a bad rap. And I think it's changing in the sense that technology has disrupted everything. So now the people that are actually exploding, and we talked about this last night a bit, are one, they're not really attached to major corporations that are just trying to make a quick buck off of them. They're in charge of their own trajectory with career, and they don't have to make the music so dark. And so I think there's a shift happening right now in music. And I'm not saying it's a shift towards revival per se, but at the very least, what I grew up on and what my son is growing up on is a huge difference. Even the biggest artists aren't saying the things that they were saying in the 90s. Like I went and saw Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, the Chronic tour at the San Diego Sports Arena when I was like 9. I was like the only white kid there on someone's shoulders. And it's just complete debauchery, smoking weed, women flashing their boobs, like craziness. My son's exposure, even on a mainstream level, like even if you look at whoever, Drake, or like it's not what Snoop was saying in 93 and 94. It's still dark. And now there's a whole other class of artists rising up, from my buddy Nick D to Paul Russell to guys like Indie Tribe, John Keith, Connor Price, Forrest Frank, Jake. They're totally the antithesis of everything that kind of hip hop is known for, but they're making great music and it's wholesome and it's positive and it's moving the needle. And a lot of it is independent. There's not a big corporation behind it. If Christians want great art, then support Christians who make great art and you'll get more of it. And it's really that simple. So I think there's been this tendency to like flee the arts and flee the media instead of leaning into the arts and the media and saying, how can we redeem this to the glory of God? So I think there's a shift happening.
That's fascinating. I'm so glad I asked you that question. But I mean, certain musical genres lead to a certain feeling, eh? So like you can't imagine a very heavy metal song singing about the beauty of autumn right? Something like that. I mean, maybe it exists, but it doesn't lend itself to that. It lends itself more to kind of the middle finger to the establishment, that kind of thing. Is rap similar in that way? It kind of provokes an emotion and lyrics that are more degenerate, more easily line up with it?
It can, but it could also be very sentimental. So if you think of, maybe your audience isn't familiar, but you go back and listen to Tupac's Dear Mama, and it'll tear you up.
I don't think I've heard one Tupac song in my entire life.
We're going to listen to some Tupac after this. So Tupac's Dear Mama is a beautiful song, and it's just about growing up as a poor kid and seeing a mom that's addicted to drugs and the challenges that she's got to go through, and it's a beautiful song. And this is at the peak of the gangster rap era, right? So there's these moments. I mean, you listen to one of the ways I went from being an atheist to a theist was because of Tupac and DMX, because they would have these hardcore albums, but then there would be these moments where they're reflecting and they're talking about God. DMX used to do these albums, and the end of the album was him crying out and praying to Jesus. The whole album would just be complete debauchery and just craziness. And then the last song, "Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you in Jesus' name." And he would just do these crazy prayers, and then it would go into like a song to Jesus, crying out to Jesus. And it was really fascinating to see that. So there's always been this overlap between faith and hip hop. It's just the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh are going to completely take it to the most logical conclusion, which is hedonism. Live for yourself, be your own God. So there's this tension all throughout. You listen to, and these guys, I mean, Tupac was 25 when he died, and you go back and you listen to some of the stuff he was saying. It was very profound. There's a lot of stuff that was really wrong as well and sinful. But I think rap is not just a sound. Rap has soul, rap has gospel, rap has funk, there's so many combinations on the musical soundtrack to it. So yes, you can listen to music and it gets you hyped up for a game, for a football game, for a basketball game, but it could also make you reflect and think about your mother and how awesome she was in overcoming the struggles of a single parent, So it's the soundscape is different. I'm not sure if that's making sense.
I think it makes sense. But I'm even thinking sometimes I'll work out and I'll listen to heavy metal, like Christian heavy metal. But even the Christian heavy metal, it's not using praise and worship lyrics, but just shouting them. Rather, it's talking about spiritual warfare and things like that, because the music lends itself to that kind of violent, those violent lyrics. Does something similar happen in rap and hip hop, where it has to be more?
Not all of it. Like it would depend on again. So now within hip hop, there's subgenres. There's different, So there's stuff that definitely is like more.
Pull this out a little bit.
Sure.
So it's in front of you.
Yeah, there's definitely subgenres that are more hardcore and like get people hyped up. There's subgenres that are. There's like an overlap right now of like a worship rap genre. If you look at what Forrest Frank is doing, it's very. Worshipful. I don't know how else to say it, and so it's simple enough where my 3-year-old can remember it, but it's creative enough where I, as a grown man, can appreciate it. And so there's a wide spectrum of that, but there is stuff that'll get you hyped. I mean, you go back to a lot of the early 2000s records, a lot of the DMX and the 50 Cent records, and they'll definitely get you pumped up. And that's what we would play before our basketball games, right? Is the tricky part is, I don't think people know that this is cosplay. I don't think people, back then it was cosplay. These guys weren't really out there killing everyone, right? So you suspend your disbelief just like you're watching a movie, right? The issue is then the art becomes life. And that's what we saw happen. And then there's a huge amount of these rappers that tragically passed, whether from violent deaths or from overdoses. And it's sad, but again, I'm hopeful that there's a shift happening. And I don't think any genre of music or any tone or any aesthetic is beyond God using it for his glory, directly or indirectly. So God used DMX and Tupac while DMX and Tupac were really far gone in terms of their lifestyle. But that God can do that in an intentional way. So with guys like Lecrae and Reach Records,
just like Israel plundered Egypt and the church fathers plundered Greek philosophy, we can do the same.
That's right.
Reclaim it, baptize
That's right.
it.
We can, there's 3 ways we can interact with culture. One is to receive different aspects. So if you're coming to my Armenian barbecue, that's good culture. You can just come hang out, the food, the history, right? You can just receive it. Then there's other parts where we have to reject. There's aspects of probably every culture that we go, wait a minute, no. This is pagan, this is hedonism, this is bad. We got to reject these parts. But then there's aspects of culture that we can redeem onto the glory of God. And so I would say, knowing where to categorize, are we receiving it, are we rejecting it, or are we redeeming it? And I think what people do is they'll hyper generalize something like hip hop, and they'll just go, oh, we just got to reject that. It's bad. It's all bad. Instead of saying, wait, hold on. What aspects of it can we receive? So like the 80s origins of it really started as rent parties in the projects in the Bronx, meaning somebody would be low on funds. And so the community would get together, they'd have a party, and they'd raise money to help someone make their rent. That's a good thing. They're coming together communally, and they're trying to help someone that's struggling. That's something we can receive, right? The festive aspect of that. Then there's aspects that we absolutely have to reject. The objectifying women and the violence, all of that has to be rejected. But then there's other parts that we can redeem, and we could say, okay, some of this has been used negatively, but we can take it and we can redeem it to the glory of God to make it an instrument for ushering in beauty and goodness and revelation of truth.
No, that's great. Now, I'm sure there's people who say to you, yeah, I listen to rap that has debaucherous lyrics that glorifies fornication and violence, but I that doesn't mean it affects me. So I can listen to that and be fine with it. I can make that sort of mental separation between what they're saying, and I just listen to it because I like the beat, I like how they rap. What advice would you give to someone like that who's trying to be a Christian, is saying that sort of thing?
I used to say that. If I'm being honest with you, I used to say that, hey, I can compartmentalize this, and this is okay because it doesn't really have an effect on me. I would challenge that presupposition. Does it really not have an effect on you? Because if the soundtrack of your life is something that's the antithesis of your worldview, does that really not affect you? That would be my first question. Because if I'm being honest in hindsight, there was definitely stuff that affected me, and my mood would be different when I would listen to worship music or gospel music. I would feel different. I would think different. And so the soundtrack of our life should reflect our worldview. Secondly, I would say, even if it doesn't affect you, I know guys that say, hey, I just listen to this when I'm in the gym. I want to get pumped up. I'm listening to Future. I'm listening to, fill in the blank. Okay. Are you okay with consistently funding corporations and funding music? Because every time you listen to something, now it's a click into something. So every time you're consuming a song, you are telling Spotify or Apple Music, yes, I like this song, and I'm voting with my dollars, though it be at a small percentage, whether that's YouTube ad dollars or Spotify, you're paying for your subscription. Every time you consume something, you're actually pushing it forward in the algorithm. So this is different where my day people would buy a CD and we would burn a CD, or buy a tape and we would dub a tape. This is now you're actually advocating for the consumption of something that's deplorable, and again, the antithesis of your faith. So even if it's not affecting you, are you okay with pushing that forward in the algorithm? And do you think that that's wholesome and helpful? Because every time you're not consuming something that's reflecting your worldview, you're pushing something that's the opposite. Whereas you can find great Christian artists, maybe that aren't making Christian music, but they are Christians, living Christians, loving their wives in churches, and help push that. And it's clean and it's wholesome and it's stuff that if you reward that in the algorithm, more of that will get pushed in the algorithm and more of that will get made.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.